And hello, everyone. Welcome to Justice for All Now. I'm your host, Hannah Zuberi. You're watching us on Muslim Network TV, America's only Muslim-focused TV channel. You can watch Muslim Network TV 24/7 on Galaxy Satellite 19, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and various social media platforms. Today, I have the pleasure to have two amazing guests who are disability activists in their own realms, and we're going to have this conversation that I've been looking forward to have. In the past, we've had disability activists like Mohsin. We've spoken to Dilshad Ali, who has a son with autism, and she's been a force in working locally at her state level on disability rights. But today we have some Sa'diyya Nesar. She's an international activist. Sadiyya is the author of a new book called Strength from Within that is based on her life with physical disabilities and deriving strength from the stories of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophets. She received her Bachelors of Art degree in English Literature and Literature from Hong Kong University. She pursued her Islamic studies thereafter and written for a variety of outlets, including the Huffington Post, Sisters Magazine. She also delivered a TED Talk that raised social realities about those who have disabilities, what they face, and is currently Hong Kong's Resolve 2020 Social Justice Fellow on the theme of disabilities, less assumptions, more conversations. Thank you so much, Sadiyya, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're grateful, and I know it's nighttime in Hong Kong, and so you're up after hours. So thank you so much for accommodating your schedule for us. And our other guest that I wanted to invite on is Sister Zeba Khan. She is currently the Director of Development for Muslim Matters and a dear friend and colleague. She's a producer of the newly launched Muslim Matters podcast. She's a writer, a speaker, and a disability awareness advocate. Now, Zeba's work on special needs goes way beyond just the United States. She was the founder of Autism UAE and is currently the special needs coordinator for her local masjid as well in Dallas, Texas. Zeba managed Autism UAE, which is an organization that provided at-cost services for children on the autism spectrum. As a parent of a special needs child and herself, we're going to talk about a lot of us online knew Zeba as a special needs advocate until one day she came out of the closet. So inshallah, let's start with Sadiyya. Sadiyya, we wanted to show a little bit a video. I know it's from your past when you were a little bit younger, but we did want our audience to see your journey. So if we could play that video. It takes a little bit of time, but while they're bringing that up, we're going to be talking about your book next as well, and I'm really excited to learn about that. And we're going to share where you can purchase Sadiyya's book in the comments, and so hopefully you all can support the sister, inshallah. When we do some of this, it's just been such a great experience working on the back end of this and trying to see how.
There was a time in my life when I did not understand why life was filled with struggles and hardships. Why did we have to endure tests and experience pain? Why are we left to feel alone and in darkness when facing life's trials? Why did life have to be difficult? I experienced these thoughts from a young age. into my life with physical disability. My life forced me to feel both physical and emotional pain ever since young, where I had to be admitted to hospitals year after year for months, to a place where I felt alone and abandoned, a place of suffering and grief. The hospital was a place where I was locked away and where I felt buried deep, a place where I felt like there was no ray of hope, a place where life's tests pressured me into feeling pain, into feeling broken without the hope to regain, the hope to regain strength and grow, the hope to flourish and live a fulfilled life like the average youth. At the age of 7, I came across Islamic books at the hospital, books on the prophets and the companions and how they coped with their life's challenges. At the age of 9, the story of Prophet Yusuf salam was the one that resonated with me the most. The story of Yusuf salam as a child, where he was separated from his parents, where he did not get to grow up under their roof and care, where he was taken and locked away. I resonated with his story the most because I was not under my parents' roof, but rather I was within hospital walls, where I had to experience the pain of being ripped away from their arms day in and day out, time and time again, where I was left in a place that I did not want to be left in, where I was trapped in a place where I did not want to be trapped.
When did you make that video, Sa'diyya?
Around 6 years ago, in my early 20s, like 23, I think, 23. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a journey since then, and I wanted to learn more about that journey. One of the things that we do on this show, we specifically focus on grassroots activists that are working on not only just education and awareness, but taking it to the next level and bringing around positive change in their communities. So a lot of times, we can have discussions on disability and Islam and awareness about disability, but to take that awareness about and cause change with it, only a few people do that. So this is where I'm really, really impressed by your work and your ethic and just being able to be this force of positive change. So share your journey with us.
Well, it has been a long journey. I've evolved. Like the talk that you just listened to, that was like one of my first few talks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more motivational.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've kind of changed from that. Now I address the social realities a bit more. Mm-hmm. And I noticed when I was younger, I would go into the stories of the prophets and as a cover up, to address social realities instead of directly addressing it.
Okay.
And right now I'm more direct, more confident, and more firm. It's not motivational now. It's more firm. And I feel like I'm still growing. I'm still evolving. I recently joined a fellowship on disabilities, and I'm still realizing that there's still so much that I don't know, and there's still so much to learn. So this social justice journey is more like a growing journey.
Definitely. And so as you lived in, you've gone through this journey of activism in the disability, what are some of the lessons, or can you point some highlights of that journey that you really felt like that was a turning point for you, and that you realized that you have to go beyond the motivational and inspirational awareness and build that into an actual causing change or policy changes?
I think the shift happened when I was writing for my book, because writing pushed me to process everything, my whole life. And also in my book, I write using like the stories of the prophets and how that helped me. But I couldn't hide behind the stories of the prophets as much, because I was forced to face my experiences, and I was forced to research to see if others with disabilities go through similar, whether they experience microaggressions. And I think the awareness through writing made me realize that I need to change my approach. I need to move beyond the motivational side of speaking and really address reality straight on. Not just address through writing or speaking, but working with others that have same goals. Yes.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that. And we're going to talk about your book a little later. I'm going to ask Zeba now. Zeba, you've been writing about disability and special needs parenting for a while now. But with this article that was published in Muslim Matters, I believe also around 6 years ago, you came out of the closet. What does that mean?
Well, it was interesting because I had spent a lot of my public time and energy advocating for my son and advocating for other children who couldn't afford therapy, but really desperately needed it. And at the same time, a lot of my energy was being sapped by the fact that I was dealing with my own chronic illness. And so at a certain point, it felt almost hypocritical to be talking about awareness and inclusion and the destigmatizing of autism when I myself was carrying the idea that, oh no, if I tell people that I'm actually sick and the reason why I failed to show up to my speaking engagement, which I did once, which was terribly embarrassing, was because I was so sick I couldn't make it. And people didn't know I was sick, and I felt like I was being some sort of like diva by being, oh, my son has autism. Also, I'm chronically ill too. Cough, cough. Just I had this emotional cultural baggage of like, don't ask for attention. It's like, stop drawing attention to yourself. Stop being so demanding. Stop making such a big deal over something, which is what a lot of people are told when they come to, religious figures or family leaders or masjid boards with a complaint like, oh, my wheelchair doesn't fit through the wudu area. They're like, oh, stop making a big deal. So you internalize those things after a while. And I realized that I have to make a big deal about this, because if I don't, not only does it mess things up for me, it messes things up for other people. For me to be broadcasting my son's disability and yet somehow hiding mine. So it took a lot of mental work to get there, but I eventually made it.
I'm glad you made it. And you wrote a follow-up article on this, and I'm going to read a little bit of that because you talk deeply about, you say, my advocacy has been an educational experience for myself as well. In talking to the Muslim community about disability, I've learned a lot from the Muslim community about disability. And you talk about how Muslims say Muslims with disabilities deserve better, and everybody always agrees and they say yay, and Muslims have a right to the masjid, and everybody agrees and says yes. But then you found a lot of differences of opinions. What were those differences of opinion?
The biggest difference of opinion that I face is the idea that Muslims with disabilities being accommodated in the community and included in the masjid is nafil. It's optional. It's something that you get to after handling all your other responsibilities. Like, yeah, sure, we'll build a wheelchair ramp after we paint the stripes back on the parking lot. Oh, there's children dying in Yemen. How can we raise money for an automatic door? And it's like, but you have an obligation to serve the people who are coming to your masjid. And if the people who are coming to your masjid can't make it in the door, or if the people coming to the masjid can't understand the khutbah because you don't provide ASL interpretation, then you failed in your immediate fara'id, your immediate responsibilities to the people whom you directly serve. And there will always be children dying in some part of the world. May Allah heal them and help them and protect them. But to put accommodation into the category of nafil really messes up the entire system where leaders are responsible to and answerable to the people that they represent, even in the Muslim community.
Sa'diyya, I want to ask you, do you see similar trends in Hong Kong where you're based, in the Muslim community there?
Yes, people assume that we don't need to go to the masjid because our quote-unquote spiritual needs can be met at home. Like, it's more easier. So why? Like, why? Like, all of the massages here are not accessible, and I use a wheelchair. And like, but I still try to go, even if it's both of my parents lifting me up and people and staring at me. But they think like, you know, you can pray at home, so why come? And also I started doing talks at the masjid, but you know, we have spiritual needs. We want to be part of a community. It's natural to want to go out, and I hope like the Muslim community can relate with due to COVID-19, because now almost everyone is stuck at home, and they're like, oh, we're missing out. We missed the masjid. We want to go, especially last Ramadan. But this is nothing new for a lot of those with disabilities and their families.
So true and so powerful, because if you think about it, I've heard from folks in the special needs area is now these masajid have become much more accessible because of COVID for them as well, because now you do have folks, they have closed captioning and they're broadcasting the khutbahs, and there's du'as being taught online which was not happening before. So yes, it does seem like that. Zeba, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, like, to the people who are like, oh no, I can't go to the masjid now. Serves you right. Welcome to our world. For my child having autism, we were unmasked for 6 years. And there are people in our community whose children have lethal, like life-threatening peanut allergies. And then the masjid is still like, yeah, what's wrong? I mean, he doesn't need to eat the peanuts. We can serve iftar and serve peanut baklava. Like, there's no other dessert the entire world that exists. Like, very simple policies that are implemented in other places, you push up, but you find resistance against, because as Sa'diyya mentioned, well, you don't need to be in the masjid. It's like, why do we have to justify that we need to be in the masjid? We're entitled to the masjid the same way that you're entitled to the masjid. The difference is that you're gatekeeping on our rights. That's the only difference that's going on. So I 100% agree with Sa'diyya. It's like, welcome to lockdown. Thanks. I was unmasked for 6 years. Get used to it.
Sa'diyya, does Hong Kong have a Disabilities Act? Is there any policy on the government level that mandates that hospital or office buildings or places of worship accommodate people with disabilities?
Yes, there are laws, but implementing the laws is a different story. We have laws, especially like buildings, they should be accessible.
Okay.
But currently, none of our masajids are accessible. And we don't have like a lot of professionals even within the Muslim community to consult and talk about this. How can we make our masajids accessible? How can we move forward? How can we try to implement the laws? We just recently started community care and brought up the topic of disability for the first time in Islam, disability in Islam. So we are literally starting from scratch when it comes to awareness within the Muslim community.
Wow. And what about the broader community? What are the sort of attitudes of people in your country?
I relatively had a positive experience within the wider community. but I did go to an international school, so we were accommodated. I had teachers from different backgrounds from all around the world. And I went to a mainstream school, so and there was a special educational needs department. And we were taught, like the mainstream students were taught about the reality of how those with disabilities can experience bullying. So there was awareness, there were campaigns. But I'm not sure as much compared to the local schools because I didn't go. And but in the Muslim community, so far there haven't been awareness.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Zeba, you have had experience starting a for-profit business that provided special needs services in a country in the Gulf, what was that experience like? And I know we've talked privately on this before. Why was it not a nonprofit? Why was it not a charity? I know you had that desire to serve because you thought these services should be provided because a lot of people could not afford them. So let's talk a little bit about your experience with Autism UAE.
So the UAE is a very interesting place because the population is almost entirely composed of expats. So everyone is coming and going. It's a bit like a revolving door. And so the result of that is that there can be a lot of abuse of charitable causes. There can be a lot of abuse of non-for-profit licenses. A lot of people raising money for charities that don't exist. And then when people are caught, they just pass through the other side of the revolving door and they're gone without any follow-up. And so what the UAE has done in order to curtail this type of abuse was they made it so that in order for you to start a not-for-profit and have it registered with the Awqaf, which is the Ministry of Religious Affairs, you have to be a local. I'm not a local. I appreciate where that law comes from. But because of that, I wasn't able to ever collect charity or receive charity to pay for the therapies that our kids were getting. So the therapy was always provided at cost, though I was never able to get it provided for less than that, unfortunately. And there's actually a lot of funding available in the UAE. As you can imagine, where there's money and where there's Muslims, mashallah, there's charity. But not being able to receive that really hampered the growth of the organization, unfortunately. But I appreciate that law exists because there was a lot of flagrant abuse beforehand.
Before then. Now, have there been changes? Like, what were within your time that you did the work there? What were some of the perhaps policy changes that you saw that gave you hope, or trends or attitudinal changes? Were there any? Are you hopeful? Or as when we were researching this episode, one of the things that our producers pulled up was that inequality impacts more than 1 billion people with disabilities around the world. Is that awareness of that in the circles that both of you work in?
I wouldn't say that we're there yet. I would say that there was definitely positive change while I was there. The Dubai Autism Center, for example, just before I moved out of the UAE, they finished their mega campus. Like before the Dubai Autism Center, not my organization, the government's organization, was in like a very large villa with many, like, these big villas. They have like the servants' quarters and the main family house and the second family house. So it was this, relatively large estate. But that was the Dubai Autism Center, and they had a waiting list of over 6 years. Wow. So just before I left, they finished their mega center, which was literally the entire block, which is wonderful because that really increases the capacity of the children that they can serve. But one of the barriers that these same kids face is the idea that their parents won't get them assessed in the first place. And this isn't limited to Khalijis. This isn't limited to Pakistanis. This isn't limited to, Indians or any one specific ethnicity or religion. There's so much stigma against a child having a special need that people won't even take their children for an assessment until it's so late that the opportunity for early intervention has passed. And they will deliberately lie to schools and say, no, he has no conditions, he's neurotypical. And then they get them admitted into these private schools, which, by the way, have no government mandates on accepting children with disabilities. They're a for-profit business. If someone takes up more of a teacher's time or resources, they're gone. I mean, my kid was kicked out of 3 kindergartens. That's the story of educating a special needs child in the UAE. So there's the barrier to services, which is the cost, which is exorbitantly high. And then there's the barrier to assessment, and that's cultural. And that's internally measured. I can't tell you how much that's changed individually in a person's heart, but the Dubai Autism Center does run campaigns, every year to try and address that.
Okay, so Sadiyya.
As for Hong Kong, I think people are, well, in the Muslim community specifically, they're beginning to be aware. Like before, they wouldn't know what microaggression meant or what ableism meant, but they're beginning to be aware. They're beginning to have conversations and reach out, and even some of the students, they want to do projects on disability at university. Like they're beginning to take interest. So there is hope for the younger generation, and I'm especially hopeful through the community care in Islam project to bring up different social justice matters, not only for those with disabilities, but also our elderly or our weavers. Like we're beginning to have such discussions. So hopefully we're moving forward.
And how does the charity world work in Hong Kong? Are there similar laws there on charities, or is it, is it easier to raise money to start a nonprofit, an NGO, to address this?
Yeah, it's similar to the UK, like internationally. Like we can have NGOs, we can set up social enterprises, and there are laws to protect, and transparency laws as well when you donate. So we can run things like we would run things internationally, like in the US or in the UK.
So is there, and I want to go back to, I'll go back to both of your writings as well, but currently, are there any projects that you are working on in Hong Kong that you'd like to share with us? Do you have any plans of starting your own NGO to address this? I want to know how much support you have behind you.
Well, I'm currently part of a disability fellowship within the wider community, and we're literally being trained like to know about all disability matters and even NGO matters, and also how to advocate like in different platforms. And we have a mentorship system. So I've been assigned a mentor from the university, like a human rights lawyer. So there is support within the wider community. And we have to have a 5-year social justice plan. And I was thinking like that I want to establish an NGO ultimately, but I want to see how to bring everyone together, especially within the academic field, how to advance research related to the realities those with disabilities face. Because when preparing talks, like including data, I realized that we didn't have a lot of data available. And it's really hard to like present the reality without data. Stories are powerful in their own right, but we need our academics to be involved. We need our human rights lawyers to be involved. We need people from different backgrounds to contribute their expertise.
Sure. Otherwise, the burden does fall on you all, and you're a lot of times going through. Yeah, go ahead.
It does fall on the disabled, but it's not supposed to.
It's not supposed to.
Ideally.
I want to have this conversation because when we're working with impacted people of any community, of any work that's being done, it's a very fine balance, right? Do you want to take the burden off of the impacted community and do the work, because they're going already, whether it's someone going through genocide or someone going through violence against women, or it's a rape victim, it's a survivor of domestic violence, or someone with disabilities. They're already going through a lot of trauma in their life because of fighting societal attitudes, because of just daily, day to day, just sitting in a chair is hard. It might not seem so for people watching, but it's physically exhausting. So now to do that extra work to now change society and have that responsibility dumped on your shoulders as well. So that's one. But where does someone walk that fine line where they don't usurp your voices and speak for you and over you, but be that ally, that support, buoying you and your work and your causes up?
2 magic words: listen and help. A lot of people are like, oh, I can't do anything. Like our masjid, alhamdulillah, has the khutbah translated in in real time into American Sign Language.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's broadcast internationally. And as far as we know, we're actually the only masjid in the country that does that.
Mm.
So as a result of which, there's only one khutbah accessible to deaf American Muslims.
True.
It's not the deaf Muslims' job to come to us and ask for this. They don't even know what's going on in the khutbah anyways. A lot of Muslims are a lot of deaf and hard of hearing Muslims are so disconnected from the community, they don't even know what they're missing.
Mm.
So when people are saying like, oh, we don't know enough about it, all you have to say is, wait, I know someone who does, and then go get them. Like, for example, Global Deaf Muslims, or the ISDHH, which is International Services for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, who provide the interpretation for our masjid, who are composed of deaf Muslims doing their own work, advocating for themselves. They don't need you to reinvent the wheel. They just need you to open the door.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to not step on people as you try and help them.
Exactly. Sadiyya.
And I think those with disabilities, we need to keep in mind that it's not our responsibility, but we do feel that heavy responsibility, and we do, so we go and try anyway. But it's really important when you are involved in community work to balance self-care and establish a support system.
Mm-hmm.
Ask for help from those you trust. And there are those that really care, those that really want to help, those that really would take the time to read about disability matters, read about the laws. But this is something I struggle with, because I find this work draining, but I end up going and doing it anyway, because I think we feel that social responsibility regardless. It's really a heavy responsibility.
The word responsibility itself, by the way, like when we use that, we're often trying to establish blame. We're trying to establish blame, and so then we're trying to establish whose job it is to fix this problem. It might be a better way to look at it to say, whose job is this and who has what part of each job. So as a parent of a child with autism, it's my job to tell a masjid, what does my child need? And then it's a masjid's job to provide it. And it's a community's job to support it and to tell each other about it and make it so that it's as welcoming to my son as it is to other people's children. So we all have different parts of this job, though it's no one's fault per se. It's no one's responsibility that this situation exists where certain Muslims can't get to the masjid, or certain Muslims can't access Islamic content, or certain Muslims can't attend classes unless you accommodate for them. But it's a lot of people's jobs, and a lot of people have different jobs within this bigger project in order to make it successful. So we do have a job. It's draining, Sadiyya. You are 100% right. It is tiring. It's like, I don't want to advocate for everything all the time. Like, yeah, I want to go to this conference or whatever, but they're using hard plastic chairs and there's no way I can sit on that. And maybe I really just don't want to have to deal with asking the organizer if they have something better to sit in, or taking a wheelchair there. So I'll stay home. It happens sometimes. Everybody needs a break, but yeah, it's exhausting.
Sadia, and something you mentioned, self-care, and I want to talk about self-care. But one thing that I do want to notice is also there's this extremely sometimes toxic social media culture
Yeah.
of wokeness, and which tears down people who sometimes don't know enough or don't know the right language to use, but want to help. And there, and yes, we should educate ourselves and take again that responsibility as people who may not have special needs, if you're going to be engaging with people or engaging with anybody who is or engaging in that field, to learn about it before stepping and sharing your opinion. So I agree, so that is one aspect of it. But there is this very, like, when you talk on, when you see the tweets, I would like to get both of your takes on that. It scares some people off. It's because they're so scared of saying the wrong thing.
Well, for me, I'm so selective how I spend my time online.
Mm.
I find Twitter very toxic, so I'm rarely on Twitter, even though I should be. I should, but I'm rarely on Twitter. And on Facebook, I do find the environment toxic, and sometimes I do address some things, like when someone is misusing like the wrong word, but I would tell them privately. But you have to be selective online. You have to, in order to survive, in order to keep going, in order to keep putting your work out there. And also, we need to practice empathy towards those that are new to this, those that want to understand, and those that want to help.
True, and this is something that an audience member just asked is, how can people who want to help reach out, or how can people who need the help reach out to community? What are the best practices, both of you, or tips that you can share, so people can learn from your experience, and that 6 years that you have put into this work may not be 6 years for another young activist somewhere else in the world.
I think don't hesitate to reach out, even privately, to a person with a disability, but give them time to reply, and also reach out to multiple people, not only one person. Reach out to NGOs, reach out to even professors that may be studying or researching on disability. Don't expect the person with a disability to get back to you as soon as possible and to tell you every single question that you want to know, because sometimes they might not be feeling well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reality is different. Yes.
Yeah.
Seba.
I think a good place to start is to develop the sense of entitlement of a white woman. Pretend like everybody owes you things, because the Muslim world owes you. The world owes you. You are as much deserving of services and seating and inclusion as any other Muslim in that community. But until you believe that, you're always going to be kind of tiptoeing around and being like, oh, I hope I'm not bothering you.
Yes.
Or, oh, I hope I'm not disturbing the event by being here with my wheelchair. Oh, I hope I'm not distracting people from the speaker because I simply happen to exist in the same space as you and everybody's staring. Like, no, develop that sense of entitlement, because Allah said you're entitled. You are entitled to this religion. Everyone is entitled to this religion who wants to have it. Full stop. Nobody disagrees with that. There's no difference of opinion on that Islamically, whether disabled Muslims are entitled to Islam, regardless of what the disability is. So go talk to your imam. Talk to other members of the community. Where are the communities in your masjid? What are the committees? Join a committee, demand a committee, start a committee, recruit people, until you get your mind around this idea that you're not asking for special treatment. You're not stepping out of line. You're not, making a nuisance or making noise. You're making an impact. You're creating justice where there wasn't any before. So get your mind around that first, and then the means will follow depending on where you're at.
And would you say the same thing if this is in a broader sense, if they were at a doctor's office or they're in a store or anywhere else except for, because this, the disability doesn't leave you at the masjid. There's you gotta survive life, right? So what would the advice be the same, or how, especially as Muslims living in non-Muslim countries, what are some of the things that you would, you're facing dual, you're at the intersection of two oppressions. So yes,
you absolutely have to advocate for yourself in every possible sphere. And if you've been conditioned by living in a non-Muslim country to not stand out because it's safer, as Muslims tend to do, especially in America, like you really don't want to stand out because you don't want somebody to pick on you or bother you or harass you or kill you, depending on which state you're in. But you have to be able to switch on a certain advocacy mode where you're like, yes, I am at the doctor, and no, I don't want a male nurse. You're allowed to say that. You're allowed to do that. And we're almost kind of apologetic for our needs as Muslims and as people who are disabled, when again, we do have way more coming to us. We have the right to be entitled about it. And I was reminded of this just yesterday because my kids are all taking online schooling now because we're going to be in lockdown probably till Qiyamah. Inshallah, no, but it's a possibility. So they're in online school and they have online music classes, and the teacher, the assignment that my middle schooler was given was pick an instrument, play it for me, and send me a video of you playing it. And she wrote back without me telling her, we don't do instruments, we use our voice. So I can do my voice. And actually, we don't like sing hymns and stuff or Christmas carols. We listen to Quran. So here's a link. And I was like, oh, that's way braver than I would have ever done. And my daughter was just like, she sent it. And the teacher mailed her back and actually sent a video going like, wow, I had no idea. That was so beautiful. Can you recite like that? And my daughter's like, yeah.
Wonderful.
So you got to carry over that entitlement because they're your rights. You have a right to this and nobody disagrees. But when you cut yourself off, what chance does society of fulfilling your rights when they don't even know what they are? Or you pretend like, no, I'm fine. I don't need a seat. I'll just die.
And you won't really know if you don't let the other person know. And I realized more due to COVID. Like I can't go out. It's not safe for me to go out at all. But people needed me to go out for some work. But I said I can't. So they shifted everything online. So it was just like, even the TED Talk, I was the only speaker that did it virtually. Everyone had to do it in person. So you just won't realize if you just don't state what you need and what you want. It's actually not just what you want, it's what you need. And you'll be surprised.
You guys you're inspiring, because I was just venting about this online. For example, we have this working group meeting and they scheduled it during Jummah. They're trying to work on Muslim issues, Muslims going through genocide, and you're going to schedule the meeting during Jummah. And I've been, really just being like, okay, should I just be like, okay, whatever, I know I can pray Jummah later because I'm not going to the masjid? Or should I just say, no, this is prime Jummah time and none of the Muslims in this group are going to be able to attend. Sorry, reschedule your meeting. And that is exactly what you're telling everybody else to do, is just be that assertive. So, and you're not being a problem. You're not being a stone in someone's shoe. And sometimes you do need to be that stone in someone's shoe.
If somebody is in pain because they're helping people who are oppressed or disabled, that's their problem. That's not yours. That's a deficiency with their character and their morality and their ethics. You being a pain to them is like good medicine, I think.
Yeah.
Sadiyya, you have written extensively about self-care for people with disabilities. So how does one take care of themselves? What is the best advice you can give to someone who's struggling?
Set boundaries. Set boundaries. That's really, really important. Protect your space. Not out of feeling like you don't have the right, but because you want to thrive, you want to grow.
Mhm.
You know, and figure out those that are sincere to you and consult them. Allow them to be there for you. You like, especially if you're someone in community work, you're so used to being the one helping others.
Mm.
And sometimes you forget to accept help, even though you're a person with a disability and you're accepting physical help all the time. But we need to all accept emotional help. We don't have to be quote unquote strong all the time.
Mm.
And rather, accepting help is a form of strength.
Wow, that is absolutely powerful. Accepting help is a form of strength, subhanAllah. Yeah, when I'm just thinking of it, this is such a broad, we haven't even touched, there's so many layers to this, the invisibility of disabilities, and how do people within the special needs community that help each other learn from each other, not reinvent the wheel. There's just so much that can be done in learning from other organizations or other activists who have been doing this work, maybe in non-Muslim spaces, or like you were saying, involving human rights lawyers. Because how many times do we look at disability rights as human rights? Just that is an eye-opener for people, because, and this is why you're on my show, we're a human rights organization, this is a human rights show, and disability rights are human rights. I mean, this is something that, as we round up the hour, I'd like you guys to share your perspectives on that.
In my experience, people have a tendency to look at disabled Muslims and disabled people as contagious and other.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that disability rights are human rights means that you have to see people who are disabled as human. You have to find a common thread. You have to empathize. You have to be able to connect to each other as one human to one human.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't actually happen without inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So until Muslims with disabilities are part of your community, how will you get to know them? How will you see them as not other? How will you see them as being just like you, but just need some help?
Mm-hmm.
So it has to start from the top. And it seems almost like a catch-22 where, like, well, we need to have accessibility in order to have empathy. Oh, but we need empathy in order to have accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of need to have both, but without access to the main community, the opportunity for empathy to develop is dramatically reduced.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most of the time, people have some sort of care or interest in disability awareness or activism if they have a family member or a child or a parent or some vested interest in disability rights, but not a lot more people than that. And I always find it amusing and sad whenever I do a talk. I mean, obviously pre-lockdown, that most of the people in the audience are Muslims with disabilities, just looking for the validation of their right to exist in the Muslim community. And I'm like, you guys, free up a space for the people who need to hear this message. You already know that you're human. You already know that your rights are human rights, and that, if Muslims have a right to X, then disabled Muslims also have a right to X.
Exactly.
But the people that need to hear the message, they think it doesn't affect them because they're like, oh, I don't have a disability, so I don't need to know about disability rights.
Sadiyya, and please share a little bit about your book too as we wind up.
Actually, disability and improving disability, like justice within the community, it helps everyone. It is related to everyone, because we're all aging, and as we age, we lose physical strength.
Exactly.
Every one of us. So people, like, the wider community needs to stop assuming that disability justice is only for those with disabilities. It's also for our families. It's also for our friends. It's also for, like, how to develop the mindset of accommodating everyone and helping different spheres of social justice. like even racial injustice, like all forms of injustice. It's related to everyone.
So powerful. I am losing my eyesight. I'll tell you that. I wear, even when we first started this show, I was barely able to see. I remember blowing up the script to these gigantic letters so I could I read it out, and a lot of people didn't know what was going on behind the screen, and they'd see me squinting a lot, and it was, I almost lost. And this is it. It's like, this is exact. Some people are born with that disability from the minute, they come to this world, and the rest of us will eventually get to that point, because how many of us have elderly parents or aunts and uncles who are not able to function that the way they used to be, or someone might get into a car wreck or develop a disease later in life, like Zeba has shared in her experience. So this is, disability rights are human rights. And thank you, both of you, for your work. We hope to support it in any way possible. Please do buy Sadiya's book, Strength from Within. There's nothing better than learning from the lives of the prophets of our faith. And, I would like to offer both of you, we have a system in place in getting policy changes made. I'll have to check if we are able to do it for Hong Kong. And that's another fascinating, maybe down the road we could have this discussion, Sadiyya, with China taking over Hong Kong. What are you expecting from a transition from a democratic state to a communist state? That could be an hour-long discussion in itself. But thank you to the both of you for being here today and joining us. Inshallah, we hope to have you back someday. As we wrap up the hour, I'd like to remind everybody this, our Justice for All Love Ummah benefit dinner is on Saturday, November 21st. And inshallah, we are relying on you to be there, to keep the show going, to keep all the work that we've been doing. We're going to be sharing the impact that we've had in 2020 despite COVID and many others. The story of Justice for All is going to be shared. So please do join us. I believe they're sharing the link to register. So inshallah, we'll see you Saturday to love Ummah. Assalamu alaikum.